Good morning, and welcome to the Africa Weekly Talk. Today's subject on the docket is about the Chinese and their racial problems on the African continent. I'm talking about Chinese businessmen and women who have moved to Africa and invested in various African countries. So they have become part of the African socioeconomic development for quite some time now. But unfortunately, some of these businessmen and women also harbor some of these old racial segregationist, Jim Crow, apartheid South Africa systems that they cannot get rid of that stuff. And out of that, when they come to Africa, they tend to think, because of the corrupt systems that exist in most African countries, if not all of them, they can settle in these African countries and somehow applies to the same old racist bigotry, segregationist systems and get away with it. But unfortunately for them also, Africa is in a new world now. It's not the same old Africa anymore. The world has changed. All it takes is one person making a video and it blows everything up. And this is exactly what happened in Abuja, Nigeria last week, when the FCCPC of Nigeria shut down a Chinese supermarket for racial discrimination. So fellas, let's go ahead and hear what the FCCPC said and did to this Chinese supermarket. And I'll come back and dissect this whole issue. So let's go ahead and hear what they said and did with regards to this same thing that I'm talking about. It is unfortunate, but we still live in a world where people come to invest in our countries. They are there making money, but for some reason, they tend to think that they can come there and have this same racial nonsense. But we're not going to take that anymore. So let's go ahead and hear.
And finally, in Africa, a Chinese supermarket has been accused of racism against locals in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. Nigerians were outraged after they were denied entry inside the store for not being of Chinese descent. The West African nation's consumer watchdog has now shut down the Chinese market and summoned its owner. Our next report goes into detail.
Not a day goes by when China and its behavior don't make the news. This time, Chinese actions have sparked outrage almost 10,000 kilometers away. Residents in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, are enraged with the way they've been treated. A Chinese supermarket in Nigeria is at the center of controversy. The shop is located in a building run by the Chinese Chamber of Commerce in the Nigerian capital. The Chinese supermarket has been accused of racism by denying entry to African shoppers. After videos of the supermarket's blatant racism against local Nigerians went viral, the West African nation's consumer protection watchdog closed down the Chinese store. Officials of Nigeria's Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission locked down the Chinese supermarket until further notice. They also summoned the store's owner for investigation. So how did this instance of Chinese racism against Nigerians in their own country surface? It all started earlier this week. A group of Nigerians went to the Chinese Chamber of Commerce to shop from its supermarket. They were all stopped at the entrance by guards who said that people of only Chinese descent were allowed inside. And then the outcry began. Nigerian authorities have refused to reopen the Chinese supermarket. However, the racist attitude by Chinese towards Nigerians and Africans is nothing new. Reports highlight that Chinese social media is full of anti-African content. And despite calls for controlling racism on Chinese social media, Beijing has done almost nothing about it. Chinese racism came into spotlight even before the COVID-19 pandemic. Africans who were living in China became victims of Chinese racism repeatedly. Over the years, reports of Africans being treated unfairly by the Chinese have become far too frequent. It reached a point where governments had to intervene to douse the flames. And instead of facing the crisis,
All right, fellas. So basically, you heard exactly what has been going on. You heard exactly what has been going on with regards to the situation in Nigeria. That led to the FCCPC of Nigeria shutting down this Chinese supermarket in Abuja. I mean, we're talking about the capital of Nigeria, Abuja. That is where this alleged racism and discrimination was going on. As much as I want to blame these Chinese people for their despicable acts and disgusting behavior towards the Nigerians, I also have to blame some of the corrupt politicians and businessmen in Nigeria as well. Because at the end of the day, if people migrate to your country and establish businesses, I mean, talk about foreigners, and like the lady reported, it is not just recently. This thing has been going on for some time now. It goes back 20, 30 years, 40 years, when the Lebanese, as well as the Indians, and even some Chinese, Asians, started setting up businesses in Africa. And they were discriminating, treating the Africans unfairly in their own land. So it's been quite a problem for some time now. But back then, when people complain and report, because of the corrupt African governments and authorities, they turn a blind eye because of these Chinese businessmen and these foreign businessmen line their pockets with their ill-gotten money. So they always tend to turn a blind eye to them. So they tend to think that somehow they can go ahead and do these things anytime they move into any African country and get away with it. Because they tend to believe that as far as they can bribe these government officials, corrupt politicians, they will get away with it. And that's exactly what happens in most African countries, if not all of them. Most of these foreign businesses tend to have that mindset. They tend to believe that as far as they can put a couple of dollars in the hands of these corrupt politicians and businessmen and their crony capitalist friends, they can do anything that they want in most of these African countries. And that is the saddest truth about how these things happen in Africa. So as much as I'm a strong advocate for direct foreign investment into African economies, because I really believe that it is only through direct private foreign investments that is going to enable Africa and help Africa with its socio-economic development, period. There's no ifs and buts about that. I strongly believe that, and I think it's a good thing for African government to have very good relationships with foreign investors to come in and set up businesses. And I'm a strong advocate of that. I have no qualms about that. But because we want foreign investors to come to our various African countries also doesn't mean that we have to turn a blind eye to these businesses when they come and treat our fellow citizens horribly. Treat them as second-class citizens in our own various African countries. As much as I like foreign investors in our various African countries, I'm also staunchly against any business or any foreign company that comes to any African country and treats its citizens as second-class citizens on their own African land. I'm sorry, fellas. I'm sorry. It should never happen. And I'm very happy that the FCCPC of Nigeria, immediately that when they heard of this situation in Abuja, went down there, shut down the supermarket, and from what I heard, have sermons for the owners of that supermarket to appear before the FCCPC. But I also hope that FCCPC will do its thorough investigation, and wherever that in the investigation will lead them to, if for whatever reason there are government officials or members of Nigerian federal agencies who are also involved or know anything about the operation of this Chinese business in Abuja, I hope the FCCPC will go further and have those Nigerian citizens who, in whichever way, enabled or connived with these Chinese businesses to also be held accountable. But like we also all know about our fellow African countries, we know the level of corruption, we know the rule of law, lack of rule of law and so on and so forth. And out of that, even though this FCCPC of Nigeria is doing their part, which I believe they will do their part, but we also understand that because when we live in a corrupt system like Nigeria, where you have very corrupt government systems that exist in that country, definitely, as far as FCCPC is working hard to find a solution to this problem, there are also going to be some people in places of power, in terms of the government, that would also do everything possible to undermine the FCCPC's investigation. It's definitely going to happen, fellas. We know that. That is what is going to happen. They're definitely going to have some key members of government officials in big political parties and so forth, who will get some money from these corrupt Chinese people to do everything to undermine the FCCPC's investigation. And if they can even find a way to get these Chinese people out of the country, they will do it. And we have a clear example of what happened to the Binance security guy, finance company executives that were sneaked out of Nigeria, and they ended up being in Kenya. Now Nigeria is waiting for Kenya to extradite them back to Nigeria to face the Nigerian authorities over their fraud allegations. So it's already happened. How did the Binance officials were able to sneak out of Nigeria when they were arrested first by Nigerian authorities? Definitely there have to be some people in government and various departments that have to know how those people left that Nigeria. So this is nothing new. So definitely when you have a situation like this, there are definitely going to be people in government positions that are going to try everything, because they get the kickbacks from these Chinese businessmen, and all they have to get is what, $1,000 or $10,000, and they will do everything to undermine the FCCPC's investigation. That's the unfortunate part. This is where we, the citizens of Africa and the citizens of Nigeria, are part of the problem. Because at the end of the day, for these things to happen on the continent of Africa, these Chinese and foreign investors have to believe that they can get away with it for them to do this. I'm very, very suspicious of even if this thing is just about racial discrimination. Because apparently, this supermarket has been in operation for some time. And it was only early this year that they decided to stop Nigerians or Africans or Black people from shopping in that supermarket. They must have been doing something illegal other than just a supermarket. There could be a front for other business. It could be, so many things, human trafficking, selling, illegal products and so on and so forth. So at the end of the day, it is out of that maybe they decided not to want Black people or Nigerians to come to their supermarket, as well as racial discrimination. It could be all of that. But right now, all these are allegations. We don't know. That is why I strongly believe that with the FCCPC's investigation, that investigation should take FCCPC all the way to wherever it leads them to. And if it involves government officials in Nigeria, those government officials have to also to be held accountable. And I hope what happened with the case of Binance doesn't happen here again. But look, fellas, this same situation that happened in Nigeria is nothing new. Like the lady said, going back to the days of COVID, how African citizens were treated in China and so on and so forth. Look, the Chinese businessmen have been doing this to Africans for some time now. You've had cases in Zambia, Kenya, Ethiopia, Cameroon, Malawi, and all over Africa. So this is nothing new. The only problem with this is that it happened in Nigeria for them. And the Nigerians are not going to sit down for this thing to happen on their land. But let's even forget about this Chinese issue and look at other foreign investors. Talking about the Lebanese and the Indians. So basically, this is not just the Chinese that tend to have this same mindset about Africans when they come and invest in Africa. The Indians do the same, as well as the Lebanese and other foreigners from Europe as well. They tend to think, you see, it all boils down to the lack of rule of law in our systems. Because these same people, when they travel to, let's say, US or the Europe, and they establish business there, will not even dare try any of these nonsense down there. Because they know the laws will not allow that, and where they are going to be in regards to this kind of behavior. They understand that. So they will tread carefully not to get themselves involved in that, because they know the rule of law will catch up with them. But these are countries with rule of law. But when it comes to Africa, in the first place, before they get there, they meet some government officials, they meet some ministers of this and that, and so on and so forth. And at the end of the day, they become friends with these ministers and so on. So they line their pockets. And these ministers, you know, they have no shame. These people have no shame. They will sell their own souls for their own family to be taken. That's who they are, for a couple of dollars. I mean, $1,000, $10,000, $15,000. That's all you need to give these people. These people have no shame. They have no respect for themselves. And out of that, these foreign companies and citizens tend to believe that they can get away with any stupid behavior that they tend to come to Africa and do there. So as much as I want to blame these Chinese people for what they have been doing, I also blame our African authorities, leaders, who have also contributed and enabled these foreign companies to treat our fellow African citizens this way. I'm sorry, that's the truth, and that's the facts. Look at your various African countries. I mean, quite recent, I think last year, there was a company in Ghana, I think a Spanish company called Mikasa. I might be right or wrong. And this company had an advertisement, I think somewhere, whether on their compound or on the side of the road or whatever, that said that they were looking for storeroom floor manager. I mean, we're talking about storeroom floor manager. And on that post, their requirements were the person has to be an European, a Lebanese, or an Indian. So basically, they didn't want any natives to apply, which happens to be the Ghanaians. I don't know what happened with that situation. There was a lot of outcry about that situation, but I don't know what the authorities of Ghana did with regards to that. But I bet you, fellas, if I'm in the power, in the position of doing something about that, that company will be packing and leaving back to their country or wherever they came from. I'm sorry. It's about time Africans, we have to show some kind of respect for ourselves. But like the old saying goes, charity begins at home. I mean, if you don't have respect for your own citizens and yourselves in your various African countries, then how do you expect these foreigners to come to our various African countries to respect us? So it starts with leadership. But because we have bad, poor leadership, that is what have contributed to these behaviors by these foreign companies. So as sad as it is, and as sad as I want to blame these Chinese and these foreigners who have invested in Africa for some of these, I mean, disgusting, despicable behaviors, you can also not take away the fact that some of these problems have come to be because of our own bad and poor leadership. And we all know what I'm talking about. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, when you have a corrupt system, I mean, you go to some of these government agencies in your various African countries, look at them. You go there, I mean, you have the minister of this, I mean, they're asking for peanuts. I mean, $1,000, $5,000, and they will sell their souls to these people. So just imagine, if you're a foreign investor and you're giving a bribe to a minister, a government director of a government agency, $5,000, $10,000, and you can do anything that you want. I mean, what else do you think these people would come to believe that they can do in your various African countries? But if you believe that the rule of law works in these countries, they will think twice. Because at the end of the day, they know that they cannot break the laws of that country that they have invested in. They know the consequences of the rule of law. But as far as they believe that we have corrupt systems and they can get away from these despicable acts, then they will do it. And that is why you have these problems all over across the continent. I mean, name it: Kenya, South Africa, Uganda, Tanzania. Name almost every African country. Fellas, you have heard a story of either Chinese or Indian or Arab or European coming there and treating our citizens like shithole people. Unfortunately, like Donald Trump said. And Donald Trump said it and equated it to the leaders of Africa. So at the end of the day, they treat our citizens like shithole people because they see our leaders as shithole leaders themselves. Because how in the world, if I can give a leader of a country, $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, and basically open up illegal businesses. Talking about go to most African countries today. Go to Ghana, where you have illegal mining with chemicals that have polluted their rivers and waters in that country, that have created poor health conditions for villagers in that country. And this is being operated by these Chinese illegal miners in most of these African countries. You go to Nigeria, the same thing down there. At the end of the day, how can these people come from their various African China and established these illegal companies, mining, to pollute our waters, which is killing people, creating health hazards, polluting our waters, the waters that these villagers drink, waters that some of these people use to bathe and drink, are being polluted with chemicals because of this illegal mining by some of these Chinese companies in our various African countries. And because our corrupt leaders have taken bribes from these people, they turn a blind eye. And these people continue to operate in our systems. So when you have things like this going on in your various African countries, what else do you expect? It is unfortunate. I don't want to talk about this, not blaming the Chinese or the foreigners who have come to our land and treated us like second-class citizens. I don't want to. I want to blame them. And they have to be held accountable. But at the end of the day, we have contributed to this problem in our various African countries. And that is what we have to understand. Because we cannot just sit down and blame these foreigners if our leaders, if our corrupt leaders have not contributed to these problems. These people travel to Europe. They have investments in America. They have investments in Europe and all over the world. Why don't they do the same down here? Why don't they do the same down even in China, in their own country? You go to China as an African and try to establish an illegal business, see where you're going to be at. Go down there. For some reason, I don't even get it. You're talking about, you have some of our leaders who claim they are educated in Europe and America, and so some of them are so backward, as if like they don't know anything. I remember in the late 80s and 90s, when you turn on your TV in America, all you saw was ships, boats, full load of Chinese stowaway illegal immigrants. That's what we used to see in America in the late 80s and early 90s. Stowaway boats full of Chinese immigrants. Back then, you wouldn't see Latin American people crossing the border from Mexico and so forth. All you saw on TV, every nightly news in the evening, in the early 90s, all you saw were Chinese people. China is still a poor country, fellas. China is still a third world country. I understand today they have put a lot of money in Africa and so on. So a lot of Africans tend to see these people like they are like developed or world-class country. They are not. According to every statistical data, it is still a third world country, fellas. I mean, you see these glass buildings in Shanghai, what do you call it, Wuhan, Beijing. That's all. Majority of the population are still poor. They live in rural areas in China. I mean, we talk about 1.5 billion people. 1.5 billion people. About 1 billion of them still live under our middle class situation in China. I mean, talking about China, I mean, per median income, capital of China, is between what, $17,000 to $20,000. $17,000 to $20,000. I mean, per median income of United States of America is around $75,000. Look at the difference. And per median income of Europe is between $50,000 to $60,000. So comparing these developed countries, US, Europe, and you look at China, $17,000 to $20,000 per median income. Are you kidding me? It's not even close. No wonder the biggest bank in the world, JP Morgan Chase CEO, Jamie Dimon, last year in an article with Economist, said it. He said China is still a third world country. So he doesn't even understand why people talk about China as if like America is competing I mean, America is not competing with China. America is way ahead of China. America's economy is about what, $26, $27 trillion. We're talking about, fellows. China is about what, 19, 18, 19 trillion. I mean, that's what we are talking about. It's still a third world country. So for us in Africa, I get it. I mean, we have bad economic situation. You know, you have the Chinese government investing, what do you call it, socioeconomic development, infrastructure, and so on and so forth. So now all of a sudden we tend to see the Chinese like we're talking about America or Europe. I'm sorry, we are not. They are still a third world country. I mean, they are still a third world country, you know? And then talk about India. I mean, these are all poor countries. Yes, they have developed cities, Mumbai, Delhi, and so on and so forth. But majority of these people live in poverty, way poorer than a lot of Africans in Africa. I mean, India talking about 1.5 or 1.6 billion people. How many of them live in middle class status in India? Majority of 1 billion of them are poor compared to the continent of Africa. But somehow, because of our old colonial mindset, that everybody later somehow is better than us. That has to change. I mean, we have to start educating our children in schools to know that. And this is part of the reasons why some of these people, when they come to our continent, they see themselves as they are way better, superior, or that kind of nonsense over the African. Because they tend to see themselves like, I say, well, we are even lighter and all that nonsense, so we are better. When most of these people are very poor. Most of these people, African countries are way better than them. It's just unfortunate that because we have corrupt systems in our countries, we are stuck at the bottom. But if not for that, we will be way better than most of these countries, you know. But fellas, I mean, it is sad, but I'm also very happy that the FCCPC of Nigeria, after hearing of this situation, decided to take action, which is a very good thing for the FCCPC to do. And I applaud them for that. But like I stated earlier also, wherever that investigation leads the FCCPC to, if it involves federal members of Nigerian government who gave this Chinese company permit and whatever they did illegal, I hope it doesn't end up with only the Chinese citizens, the owners of this supermarket. I hope any Nigerian involved also should be held accountable. But that is the only way these things are going to stop. You have to start holding your leaders, anybody who collaborates, who connives with these foreign companies to maltreat, discriminate, and abuse the citizens of any country. It doesn't matter whether it's in Africa, Asia, or America. Anybody involved in that has to be held accountable. And that's the only way these things will change. I mean, we cannot say that, oh, we're going to blame the Chinese, and then the Nigerian politician or the minister or government official who enable them somehow gets a pass. No. It doesn't work that way. for you to solve these problems, then you have to hold everybody involved in this accountable. And that's the only way we are going to solve these problems. We cannot turn a blind eye to our leaders who connive with these foreign companies and maltreat and take advantage of our countries. I'm sorry, fellows. I'm sorry. We have to start holding our leaders accountable. And I hope FCCPC's investigation will not be halted by some of these corrupt politicians in Nigeria. Because definitely there are some of these corrupt politicians who are already talking to some of these businesses or these Chinese people, and they'll find a way to get some money from them so they can stick them out of the country. I hope not. Like I stated earlier also, the Binance situation was even a disgrace to Nigeria. For them to have the Binance executive in custody, and for some reason, how that dude sneaked out of the country, and now Nigeria are waiting extradition from Kenya to put that guy on trial. It's even a disgrace. And that is why I keep saying that at the end of the day, when you live in a system where the rule of law doesn't work, you create an environment where people tend to believe that they can get away with anything they do in your country illegal, then that is what is going to happen. You're going to create a situation like what exactly these Chinese people are alleged to have done in Abuja. Because at the end of the day, when they come and they meet these officials and they give them bribes, they line their pockets, they tend to believe that, oh, they got them in their back pocket. That's all they tend to believe. I got him in my back pocket. I mean, all I need to give him a couple of $1,000 and he's good. And I can do whatever I want. I mean, when I'm a businessman and I do that and I see that the system is corrupt, then I tend to believe that I can get away with stuff like this. I mean, it is unfortunate, fellas. It is very, very unfortunate, but that's the reality. I mean, as far as, I'm a strong advocate of direct foreign investment because I still believe that Africa's socio-economic development will only come to be with direct foreign investments. And that's where Africa has to channel its economic development to, which is very true. But that doesn't also mean that we have to turn a blind eye or bend backwards to such an illegal acts, discriminatory acts, racism, and all these despicable acts by some of these foreign companies. Not all the Chinese are doing that, fellas. But apparently, this has been going on in Africa. I mean, you hear a lot of news all over Africa. I mean, I've heard so many stuff. I mean, to the extent that some people say that they even have a Chinese police station in South Africa. I mean, are you kidding me? Give me a break. I mean, in your own motherland, you're going to have a foreigner come and dictate to you how to deal with criminal acts in your country. I mean, we should be ashamed of ourselves if you have that in your community or in your country. You should be ashamed of yourselves. It should never happen. These are the very things that it will never happen in China. So we should never allow these things to happen in our various African countries. You can't go to China and do that as an African. I'm sorry. Like I said, these people are, look, only few of these people are living in, middle class standard. If you go and put a plane down in Beijing, Wuhan, Shanghai right now, and you tell these people, we're going to America or Europe, it will take you 30 minutes. That plane will be full. They will be running, leaving their country in a minute, just like we Africans do. Because they are not better off. They are not that better off than us. I've been talking about 1.5 billion people. That's what we're talking about, fellas. They are not that better off than us. But unfortunately, because we see the development in Shanghai and these big metropolitan areas in China and them investing in infrastructure for our countries and so on, we tend to think that these people are like Europe or America. They are not. They are not. Like I stated earlier, under every classification, they are still a third world country. They are still a third world country. China, India, I mean, Lebanon. This is a war-torn country. This is a country that it doesn't even exist anymore. I mean, you're going to have a man do an ad talking about one Lebanese and doesn't even want the natives. Are you kidding me? I mean, Lebanon. Man, it is unfortunate, fellows. But anyway, that is unfortunate part of this whole situation. So, fellows, if it's Sunday, it's the Africa Weekly Talk. God bless you guys and have a great week. Peace and love, and thank you.